A crucial part of helping you guys navigate the graphic novels you're going to be reading and to better understand how graphic novels and comics really function, I like to have us start by reading over chapters in the graphic novel slash book of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. And to help you with that out here, I've got it right here. So you'll see here's his Understanding Comics. You can note that if his use of an avatar here is actually a major inspiration for how I do this myself. And I've gone ahead and linked directly to it right here. This actually takes you into a section where I have a couple things at your disposal. First of all, I've got some of the actual chapters in PowerPoint form. The PowerPoints are okay, but they're not as explanatory. But one of the things I've got here that I provided for you is actually the full text of McCloud's Understanding Comics, and it's something that we're going to be discussing in our discussion forums next week as it pertains to helping us move the ball forward into doing research surrounding the graphic novels you're going to be choosing to read. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do this week is I'd like you to look at chapters 1 through 4. And so you'll see here chapters 1, Setting the Record Straight, chapter 2, The Vocabulary of Comics, chapter 3, Blood in the Gutters, and chapter 4, Time Frames. Now, we'll be skipping over, I think, chapter 5 and chapter 6 a little, chapter 7 mainly, and chapter 8 and 9. Really the first 4 chapters are the ones that are really important, and they're going to be forming the crux of our discussion forums next week. And it's actually told in graphic novel form. So this is also a great way for you to practice your reading comprehension when it comes to comic books. Remembering always that you're reading left to right, up, down. Okay? And so if you follow along here, what I'd like you guys to do is read this and consider this and then go back and perhaps look at the accompanying PowerPoints as well. So for example, here he talks about the difference between a picture and pictures in sequence together and how they form a difference. For example, if you'll see here's a picture of a sun, and then if I do this here, this is obviously the motion or action of the sun setting. But it's interesting because if I were to flip these two images, it'd be a sun rising. And so if you think about this, he's going to get into all these little nitty-gritty details. In fact, he starts by trying to come up with a definition of what comic books are. He goes back and explains the history of how writing and pictures used to be something that was quite integrated, and he sort of explores the history of all this. And this is going to form the crux of our discussion forums next week. So you need to make sure that you read this, and I'd recommend taking some notes. Particularly ask questions. Not only take notes and make notes of the things you understood, but what are the things you didn't understand? Because one of the fastest ways for us to really get to the heart of a matter is to ask questions about the things we don't understand. And for many of you, graphic novels and comic books, from what I've already seen in the discussion forums, are a newer thing. They're something that's new. And so he's going to try and break down the definitions, and he's going to try to do a very good job here of explaining things. But even if he does that, you may still have questions about things that maybe are left unsaid or that you'd like further clarification on. Those are the kind of things that I would hope you bring out into the discussion forums. Okay? So I'm just scrolling down here, but ultimately I'd like you to get down here through chapter 4. So you'll see here that we're going all the way. Right now I'm in chapter 2. Which he's got a lot of information here about the separation between writing and art. He gets into a lot of detail here. In fact, he forms this very complex image here. I love this thing, talking about the abstract imagery, and then on the other side of this is the idea of what is written down. He gets really detailed about this, and it's really quite fascinating how he explores this. And I've got this in very summarized forms. So if I went back here and say we're looking at some of these PowerPoints, I've got them in very summarized forms, and maybe you can look at the first 2. But the best thing you're going to really get is if you're going to get out of actually reading the chapters. And so chapter 3, he talks a little bit more about that gutter space we talked about, and how that gutter space functions. And how the human imagination plays into things. And he talks about the different kinds of transitions that can happen in comic books. So he gets you some exposure to types of transitions. I apologize, I'm not trying to scroll through this super fast, but I'm really just trying to hit some high points here for you to get you primed for your own reading. And then eventually he gets down here and he talks about time frames in chapter 4 and how space and time are interconnected. So he uses this one panel here, but he then shows you that time is moving and it is in relationship to the things that are going on. So, and then of course he goes down here. So those are the chapters I'd like you to cover with regards to McCloud, and be prepared to next week to not only talk about these, but sort of absorb this information, maybe read the chapters multiple times, try to get a feel for not only what McCloud is saying, but maybe even if there are things that you feel are not fully explained to you, those are the kind of things you're going to want to bring up in the discussion forums next week. And you may even wish to ask me questions about it sooner than that. Please feel free to do so. I will be happy to answer them. But that will also be something that you may want to bring up in the discussion forums next week, because perhaps someone of your classmates did understand it, and rather than have me explain it to you, maybe they can actually do a better job of maybe explaining it to you than I can. Okay? So that's something for us to look forward to. And then, of course, we'll talk about the first 4 chapters, and then we'll wrap up on the last bit of the chapters next week. And this will hopefully provide you an avenue and an opportunity to gain some experience in the reading of graphic novels before you then actually jump into it yourself with the graphic novel that you're going to select and then do your research around.